Chapter 1. The Cliff. A cold wind swept in from the ocean as four figures could be seen standing on top of a cliff which led straight down to the raging waves and deadly rocks.
"Are you really sure we need to go down there?" Huiyu asked questioningly as he looked down at what seemed to be certain death. Yet the stubborn phoenix just hummed in reply to the question. It had been 4 months since Huiyu set out from the magical forest with Dengwu, Wang Zhulong, and Sha Yun. Since then, the group of 4 had wandered to the southwestern part of the kingdom, a place where there was nothing but water as far as the eye could see. Huiyu and his friends were standing at the very end of the peninsula, the most western part of the Taiyang kingdom. Huiyu never allowed for his eyes to become complacent, and alertness was always present within his ice-blue eyes. Standing at the end of the kingdom, Huiyu was at the very edge of the small world in which he currently resided. The peninsula was one large cliff, thousands of meters above the raging seas. Looking down, even the usually excited Sha Yun showed signs of worry as the violent waves crashed against the cliff's stone wall.
"It used to be around here," Lan Feng said while frowning slightly. Not even the firm ground looked as it had 4,000 years ago. Instead, the raging waters had corroded much, eating up tiny bits of rock year by year. 4,000 years later, those small pieces of rock turned into large chunks of land, changing the landscape completely. 4 months back, Huiyu and Sha Yun led Wang Zhulong and Dengwu through the magical forest and past the countryside, all the way to this southwesternmost point of the kingdom, the place where the entrance to the dungeons of the divine allegedly should be. During this trip, Huiyu did his very best to coerce some information from Lan Feng about these dungeons which they were about to encounter. Yet he gained nothing from the damned bird, leaving Huiyu expecting a humid and dark maze of underground tunnels where no sunshine reached. The most excitement they encountered during their trip was when they would discuss what might have transpired back in Riloa City, along with their expectations of their destination. The group intentionally stayed away from every kind of village, even the smallest and poorest, as Huiyu wished not to leave behind even the slightest trace. Huiyu brought forth everything at his disposal. Earlier he used technology which he brought with him from his old world. Although they were in their most primal versions, they were still foreign to this world. Should the Taiyang royal family get a hold of this technology, they would know for sure that Huiyu had knowledge which they could not afford to have fall into the hands of their neighboring kingdoms, or even high-ranked nobles who might revolt. Although the kingdoms had a positive relationship with one another, one never knew. In the past, more than one war had broken out in the hopes of uniting everyone under one flag. Huiyu's knowledge might not be limited to interesting inventions. The royal family would definitely want him for that knowledge alone. Another reason why there would definitely be someone after him was the fact that he revealed his power as a saint-ranked expert. The reason some would come after him was for the sake of testing whether or not his strength truly was that of a saint. If it turned out that he was a saint-ranked expert, they would do their best to persuade him to join them. Huiyu was not dumb. A saint was not someone who could be dealt with easily. Yet the Taiyang kingdom was bound to have at least a few experts of such caliber. If Huiyu did not follow their polite invitation, it was quite likely that he would be forced to join. In the worst case, he would not be living after their meeting. Shaking his head, Huiyu stopped thinking about the eventless last 4 months in which he had reached the 3rd star of the master rank, because nothing interrupted his cultivation on their trip.
He instead focused his entire attention on the cliff wall, and a sigh escaped his lips. "Just fly to the middle of this cliff." Lan Fang's voice was incredibly carefree as it explained what they needed to do. "Although the land has changed, it is impossible to remove the dungeons. So fly and search the cliffside until you find a cave the size of at least 2 meters wide and 4 meters tall. I'm sure its gate has long vanished with the land." Hearing his words, Hui Yu could not help but snort slightly. Although Lan Fang made it sound simple, it was anything but. Hui Yu would have to rely on the Qi fan to allow him to personally inspect an area which could be hundreds of kilometers long, since the Phoenix was unable to pinpoint the exact location. Although Hui Yu had opened his middle dantian, his Qi spiral was not growing. This was because his cultivation technique was greedily absorbing strand after strand of Qi, only to refine it into spiritual essence. To inspect such a vast area as needed, Hui Yu would need at least a few days of constant searching, mixed in with meditation to replenish his Qi pool. It was possible for him to produce multiple Qi fans and have his friends search with him, but if he did that, he would use up his Qi faster. Not to mention his friends would be unable to control the Qi fans because they only reacted to Hui Yu's commands and had a maximum range of 1 kilometer away from him before they would dissipate. A benefit for Hui Yu, while he was observing the cliffside, was that he came across a few rare herbs. He knew nothing about these particular ones, but Lan Fang ordered him to pick them up and promised that when they entered the dungeons, then he would be taught a little about herbs. The herbs would be incredibly valuable throughout their journey in this underground world. While Hui Yu and Sha Yun were busy at the cliff, Wang Zhulong and Deng Wu would travel towards the closest forests or grassy fields on their hunt for dinner. They would bring back anything from fresh wild berries to magical beasts ready to be grilled. During the entire trip, Deng Wu and Wang Zhulong took on the job of finding food. Usually the two would bicker about what they wished to eat, but considering that they were camping outside and that they would have to gather the food from the wild, none of those two spoiled youngsters got the food they wished for. At first, Deng Wu and Wang Zhulong found the camping lifestyle rather fun, but after a month, neither of them enjoyed it any longer. They were both used to the luxury of having servants wait on their every need, granting them anything they wished for. In nature, they had to get everything they wanted on their own. After 3 months, the two finally came to terms with their new lifestyle, and the previous young masters ended up fighting to prove that they were better suited for the rough life. Hui Yu could not help but laugh at them both, and he never once regretted bringing them, as they provided him with a lot of fun. Lan Fang was also very pleased with the two joining them. Both Wang Zhulong and Deng Wu were experts of the master rank, and both of them trained with cultivation methods provided by Lan Fang. They were far stronger than your average master, or even grandmaster-ranked cultivators. All of this was thanks to Lan Fang and his cultivation methods, which in turn had caused them to be immensely thankful, willing to do anything he asked of them. Although Deng Wu and Wang Zhulong both saw Hui Yu as their friend, they almost worshipped Lan Fang. The Phoenix had granted them all their wishes. He gave them the strength to stand on their own 2 feet. Although Little Dragon had previously granted Deng Wu a boost to his cultivation, it was just that, a boost. Lan Fang gave him a method which he could use to cultivate from now until he reached the limits of his talent. Also, he gifted Deng Wu a few high-ranked martial attack skills, and finally, he had even been willing to reveal himself for the sake of giving the Deng and Wang families a small possibility of survival. Wang Zhulong shared this adoration, as she was gifted the same things as Deng Wu, not to mention a new lease on life as a woman. Although it was hard for her to get used to the new lifestyle, it was still a place where she could be free and where she was accepted for who she was. Every time Lan Feng heard the two praise him, his feathers would flutter, puff up, and make the phoenix seem self-righteous, as though he had saved the world from a great disaster. Hui Yu would usually laugh whenever it happened, yet he could understand why his friends thought this way, and for him, it was also a great help to not be alone on the trip. There was some safety in numbers, but it also made the trip much less depressing, as there was someone to spend time with. On the 14th day of searching the cliffside, Hui Yu finally found the remnants of what had been a cave opening. He searched the entire area multiple times before Lan Feng finally mentioned that the entrance was likely to be hidden beneath vegetation or a boulder to protect itself from unwanted visitors. It turned out that this was exactly what had happened, as a large boulder was blocking the entrance. This large boulder was easily smashed by Hui Yu as he infused black blood with spiritual energy. As soon as the dagger touched the boulder, it shattered into thousands of pieces. Looking inside the cave, Hui Yu frowned slightly as it was pitch black. Within seconds, he created another 3 chi fans, which he used to gather his friends and fly them to his location. Together they all stepped into the black world of the cave, and as soon as their feet touched the ground, it seemed as though the entire world started spinning around them. Grabbing someone's hand, Hui Yu felt a suction force appear from further within the cave, and the 4 of them felt how this suction force made their feet lose contact with the ground below, and they were thrashed around within the complete darkness, before suddenly Hui Yu found himself on solid ground once more. Hui Yu instantly calmed down and flicked his hand, summoning a light stone from his storage stone. Within this light stone in his hand was a seed of sunshine, and as the rays of light lit up the cave Hui Yu ended up in, he could not help but widen his eyes as he saw Deng Wu by his side, but neither Huang Zhulong nor Sha Yun were together with them.
"Well, that was very bad luck," Lan Feng commented upon the discovery. "They arrived at another room. I guess we should go out and find them."
Chapter 2. The Maze. Hui Yu stood up, but did not rush towards the exit to start searching for Wang Zhulong and Sha Yun. Instead, he quietly observed his surroundings with an alert expression on his face. The cave was as barren as he had expected, but a few types of mushrooms grew in the darkest corners. As soon as Hui Yu activated a light stone, the mushrooms started to disintegrate as though sunlight was toxic. The light stone was truthfully a low-grade storage stone, which contained a seed of light. The storage stone was of such poor quality that the interior was exposed, allowing for the rays of sunshine to illuminate everything around it. The seed of light was not an actual plant. Instead, it was a small pearl refined from the sun's rays of light. Creating one seed of light required more than a year, and the price was extravagant, as both plant and pearl were very important. Seeds of light were not something just anyone could buy. That name was given because it could be planted in the ground, and a tree of sunshine would grow. A tree would absorb the light shining down upon it, bearing fruit that contained more seeds of light. Although this sounded like an easy process, it was vital that the trees had a constant supply of sunshine so it could refine its seeds. If not, the trees would be unable to create seeds. Within the whole of Taiyang Kingdom, only one place lived up to the harsh requirements needed for farming seeds of light. Hui Yu only brought 2 seeds of light on this trip, yet both were with him. He could not help but feel worried about Wang Zhulong and Sha Yun, who were stuck in this dark maze with no light at hand. The room that the stone lit up was dark and damp.
It was completely closed off from the world, with no windows, and only one pathway they could follow, leaving behind all discussion about which direction to take. Thinking the situation through, Hui Yu handed over the light stone to Deng Wu before he quickly sat down in meditational position. Seeing this, Deng Wu furrowed his brow in confusion, as he did not think now was the best time for cultivating. But he said nothing, and just waited patiently for the younger man to finish whatever he was doing. Hui Yu became merged with the earth, but he had yet to reach the level that would give full control over the surrounding earth. Even when perfectly merged, because the young boy still needed to hone his affinity, he was not able to command larger masses of earth. Hui Yu was seated down in meditation. Yet, unlike what Deng Wu thought, he was not cultivating. Instead, he was manipulating his earth elemental affinity to scan as much of the entire mountain as his ability would allow him to. Hui Yu was one with the earth, one with the walls of the maze as they twisted and turned inside the mountain. Unfortunately, Hui Yu's control over Earth only allowed for him to thoroughly scan up to a few kilometers away from his location, and no matter how he searched, it was impossible for him to find any trace of Sha Yun and Wang Zhulong. Frowning, Hui Yu opened his eyes and stood up, patting his robe to remove the dust that gathered while he was seated on the floor.
I did not feel the presence of any living beings, nor signs that any had ever been here, Hui Yu said aloud, explaining what he had seen. The maze continues for much further than I can scan. It goes upwards and downwards, left and right, and has many different levels. It is quite complicated. I am sure that this maze fills up quite a significant amount of space, so our biggest question is which way we should walk to find those two.
Deng Wu nodded. Although he was unable to sync with his element, he was still able to use it. He quickly found a carving knife, after which he engraved an inscription at the front of the room they ended up in. This was a safety inscription, which had multiple benefits. Deng Wu wrote it because he could leave behind a message in the inscription, and he would instantly know if any living being got close to it. Should Sha Yun and Wang Zhulong happen to stumble upon the inscription, an illusionary Deng Wu would appear, telling them to stay in the room. At the same time, Deng Wu would be informed about the two's arrival. As an inscriber, there was no limit to how far away he could be to sense it. As long as the inscription was created by him, it would inform him, even if he were to leave the plane. An inscription was something which one created by pouring their cultivation base into. Seeing Deng Wu create an inscription, Hui Yu nodded in approval before he slowly started to make his way down the only path with Deng Wu following behind. Although these roads were obviously millennia old, it was easy to see that they had been created with perfect attention to detail. The now moldy and damp stone walls had once been dry and were adorned with light stones every 15th meter. Such extravagance shocked Hui Yu deeply, as he had personally investigated the size of the maze, and he knew how rare seeds of light were. These seeds had long since withered up, unfortunately leaving no light on the now deserted hallways, causing Hui Yu to feel slight regret. Walking through the maze was done in a world of darkness, with only a little light from the light stones. It was impossible for the two men to keep track of the days. When they got hungry, they would sit down and eat some rations. When their energy was nearly depleted, they would sit down and cultivate. In another room, days before, Sha Yun and Wang Zhulong had woken up, just as Hui Yu and Deng Wu had done, only to find that they were separated from their friends. Unlike the calm and collected Hui Yu, Sha Yun instantly panicked. She was about to charge out of the stone chamber to look for her master, only to be forcefully held back by Wang Zhulong. The two women were of quite similar strength, yet currently Wang Zhulong had the advantage. She only needed to use her full strength, and Sha Yun would have to give up.
"What do you expect us to do, then?"
The snake woman hissed at the girl she was stuck with, hate evident within her eyes.
Sha Yun had been unhappy when Wang Zhulong followed along on the trip, but since it was Hui Yu's wish, she would not oppose his decision. It was, however, quite obvious that Sha Yun would do anything in her power to ensure that the other knew she was unwelcome. Wang Zhulong was an aloof kind of person. She was the complete opposite of Sha Yun, and although she did feel that Hui Yu was special, she never once paired that emotion with love, not even when her face flushed red and her heart beat rapidly. Wang Zhulong was only capable of seeing these symptoms as a sign of lacking food or rest. Currently within the room, Sha Yun was fuming with rage because she was held back by Wang Zhulong, who was searching through her different storage stones only to break into a smile finally. She fished out 2 light stones, tossing one to the snake woman. Wang Zhulong's elemental affinity was that of wood. She had a special connection with the seed of light because she used it while practicing her elemental affinity. Due to this, a dazzling light emanated out from within the transparent memory stone. Looking at the moist stone which was surrounding them, a frown could be seen on Wang Zhulong's usually very tranquil face, before she turned around, looking at Sha Yun for a moment, clearly deep in thought. Sha Yun could not help but cross her arms when she noticed Wang Zhulong staring at her, and she backed away slightly. She had no idea what the other was thinking, but it seemed to have something to do with her, and that alone caused her to be cautious. An eerie silence was slowly creeping up on Sha Yun, causing the snake woman to involuntarily shiver. Her eyes were flickering between the contemplating Wang Zhulong and the black world outside the cave. Finally, just as Sha Yun thought that she could not take the silence anymore, Wang Zhulong opened her mouth, a friendly voice sounding out.
Your affinity is earth, right?
Sha Yun was startled, yet listening to the question she nodded her head. She did indeed have an affinity for earth, an affinity she had since birth that she had honed to the best of her ability. Looking at Sha Yun and Hui Yu, both of them had an earth elemental affinity, but even so, their abilities were quite far from each other. While Hui Yu could merge with the earthen element, he was still improving. Although he was now capable of becoming one with the earth, it was limited. After all, he could currently only fuse with the earth so much. Since Sha Yun was born with her earth affinity, she had a much stronger relationship with the earth, making her attacks more powerful and allowing her to control a much larger mass of earth. However, even though Sha Yun was born with the affinity, she was not truly able to become one with earth. If a magical beast or human cultivator actually became one with the earth, or any other element for that matter, then they would lose their original bodies, and it would afterward be impossible for them to return to their former state. Due to this phenomena, the Beast Core set a limit on how much a magical beast could merge with their element. This was a limit not present in humans, and gave them the chance to increase their affinity constantly. That being said, trying to increase one's affinity as a human was no easy task. Only 1 out of 10,000 would have the talent to increase it to the point where they could completely become one with their element.
Let's try and scan the area,
Wang Zhulong said with a sigh as she gently knocked on the stone wall in front of them, and Sha Yun nodded her head. Sha Yun sat down and allowed for her body to become one with the earth. Within the silence of the room, creaking sounds could be heard as the stones around Sha Yun seemed to come alive. The small gravel on the ground started climbing up her, and within a few moments her entire tail was covered by stone. Beneath the gravel, Wang Zhulong saw how the body itself had turned to stone. Suddenly Sha Yun opened her eyes, causing Wang Zhulong to become startled as she looked at the snake woman.
Those idiots!
She hissed as she shattered the layer of stone that had condensed on top of her tail before a yellow hue reappeared on her body. She then started to break every single wall between her and her unknown destination. Wang Zhulong raised an eyebrow at her sudden action,
but said nothing as she quickly followed the swearing snake woman.
Those idiots! Why would they move away from us?
Sha-Yun grumbled as she upped her speed and crashed straight through the maze, an option which Deng Wu and Hui Yu had never even considered. Chapter 4. The Children.
We will camp here until there is no more spiritual energy within the pond.
Hui Yu relayed the orders from Lan Feng, and no one questioned him. Instead, they stayed in the spiritual spring for a long period of time, until it felt like their bodies were bursting with energy. Sha-Yun was the first to leave the pond, after which she instantly entered meditation to assist refining the spiritual energy into the type of energy used for magical beasts. This allowed for it to merge with the other energy she had within her beast core. Longzhu Long was the next person who left the pond, and her very first move was to get dressed. Afterwards, she too sat down and meditated, assisting her chi spiral and the spiritual energy sea within her to refine the sudden influx of spiritual energy. Another hour after, both Hui Yu and Deng Wu left the spiritual pond and sat down to refine the energy they had absorbed. Although there was still an immense amount of energy left in the pond, the color was far more transparent now compared to the thick silver it was previously. This evening no one went out to hunt. Instead, they all lived off rations they had packed in advance. No one spent energy on setting up tents either. Hui Yu only started a small fire by using his elemental affinity. The four youngsters were all completely focused on refining the spiritual energy they had obtained. The first day Hui Yu managed to refine enough spiritual energy for him to reach the 4th star of the master rank, while Deng Wu managed to reach the 9th star. Longzhu Long broke into the 3rd star, and Sha-Yun was also around the 3rd star with her beastly cultivation base. The night was spent using various spiritual arts to merge the new spiritual energy into the old, and then cultivate in an attempt to balance the sudden boost in strength. The following morning once more saw 4 naked youths floating within the pond that gave off a silvery hue. The same events transpired for 4 days straight before they finally absorbed the last drop of spiritual energy. There were no more breakthroughs after the first night. Despite this, all of the youngsters, apart from Deng Wu, were now at the peak of their star and ready to break through at any moment. After the final drop of spiritual energy was soaked up, Hui Yu stayed still for a long time, contemplating their options. He was very curious about the village which Lan Feng mentioned. But although he was curious, he also knew that right now his spiritual energy was quite unstable after having been increased such a significant amount within such a short time. Making his decision, Hui Yu nodded to his friends, and they all followed behind him, being as quiet as possible. On their way towards the dungeons of the divine, they were able to play and chat with each other while traveling. But their situation was different now. Hui Yu was unaware what kind of creatures lived within the forest they were entering, nor did he know if there were any humans around who would be enemies. If there were humans around these areas, it was quite likely that Hui Yu and his friends had just robbed them of their greatest treasure by soaking within the spiritual spring. No one would be kind to them for doing that. Looking towards the road which Lan Feng said led to the village, Hui Yu shook his head and went the other way. He found a small stream which brought water to the pond and decided to follow it. There was one thing which Hui Yu learned from Lan Feng that he stressed the most, and that was to be on guard. Hui Yu had friends with him whom he could rely on, yet the 4 of them were only master-ranked cultivators, and their ability to survive was mediocre at best. Now that they had gained more strength, if it was not integrated into their spiritual energy sea correctly, then it was likely to cause a backlash and injure them instead of supporting them. Following the small stream, Hui Yu saw a clearing up ahead. This caused him to stop in his tracks, and he gestured for the others to stop as well.
Smoke rose from the clearing, and Huiyu felt his hair stand on end as he looked around. Although there were no movements, he had the feeling that they were being watched. Huiyu lifted his hands up above his head as he cleared his throat while looking at the forest with vigilance. "Come out," Huiyu called with a gentle voice. "We have no intention of harming you." Having said that, rustling could be heard. But unexpectedly, it was not a horde of fierce warriors, nor was it a dangerous, wild, magical beast. Instead, it was a little boy who could not be much older than 7, yet his eyes seemed to hold time itself within them. They were completely black, with thousands of glittering stars inside. A chill ran down Huiyu's spine as he noticed his peculiar eyes. "What are you doing in my forest?" the young child asked. His voice sounded mature, with no hint of threat or enmity, only pure curiosity. Looking at the child, although he seemed innocent, Huiyu had a hard time shaking off the feeling of danger that lurked within his heart. He showed the utmost respect as he answered the question. "We are travelers from the outside. We are currently looking for a quiet place where we can stabilize our cultivation." Looking at Huiyu with a quizzical expression, the young boy stepped closer and asked, "What is this outside? Is it a new village? I don't know a village named Outside. Is it a new one? Are the 4 of you the only humans there? That girl looks weird. Why does she have a tail? Is it a place with humans like her?" Hearing so many questions, Huiyu could not help but laugh a little. He squatted down so that he was eye to eye with the young child that seemed human, but yet oddly not. "The outside is a vast place with no ceiling over the sun, no walls to hold you in. It is the place where you can wander day in and day out, yet never see the end of the road." Each word Huiyu spoke caused the black, starry eyes to grow larger and larger, causing the child to pant in excitement. "Come home with me," he said jubilantly. "I want to know more about this outside place." Following the young child, Huiyu and the rest were dragged the opposite way from where Lan Feng said the village would be. It seemed as though even this world beneath the ground had changed throughout the many years it had been left alone. Following the child, the 4 friends were led through the forest. They were stunned as they saw how the trees, although seemingly the same as the ones up on the surface, were different from what they were used to. Some of these trees even seemed as though they had a will of their own. Their branches moved away, making space for the child and his guests to travel through. Huiyu was shocked to find that the clearing, which he had seen earlier, was no longer just ahead of him, but instead a mirage, confusing anyone who looked upon it. Despite this, he followed the young child without asking any questions. Their journey through the pathway which opened up by the trees went on for only a few minutes before Huiyu and the rest ended up within a clearing where a small wooden cabin was. The cabin was made of very high-quality wood, nothing like the shack which Huiyu lived in for 10 years. Even the village elder's house would seem run down next to this beautiful cabin. This house was built with wood from the forest, and a chimney could be seen on its roof. Smoke was coming out, making Huiyu furrow his brow, confused about who would live with this star child. Getting closer, the door opened, and a small girl exited the house. This little girl was around the same age as the boy, and her eyes were the exact opposite of the boy's. A bright, golden light shone from within. "Xingye!" the girl called happily as she saw the boy arriving. The smile on her small face grew larger as she saw that he brought friends. Her little body was jumping up and down from sheer excitement. "Xiaji!" the boy called back, and upon hearing his voice, 3 other children appeared behind the first, 2 boys and 1 girl. The young boy who invited Huiyu and the others was shocked when he saw the children, but he also felt a sense of relief as no adults were near. Arriving at the cabin, the children all came up to the boy, and he patted their heads while saying their names. Chuji was the little girl. Her eyes shone with a hazel-brown color. Her hair and even her skin were also brown. Dongji was one of the boys, and he seemed even paler than Huiyu. His hair was as white as the older boys, and he had ice-blue eyes. Looking at him, one would think that Huiyu and Dongji were brothers. The last boy was very energetic. He had green eyes and golden hair. His name was Tan Huang.
Tell us about the outside. Do all humans look as weird as you do? Will we also grow a tail one day? Why are your eyes not shining?
The questions flooded in as soon as Xingye introduced the four newcomers, and a tranquil atmosphere descended over the small cabin. Huiyu sat down, and the children instantly gathered around him. "May we stay here a few days?" he asked politely, and the children all nodded their heads with such force it caused laughter to escape from all the older ones present. "I'll tell you about the world outside," Dengwu said, as he too sat down. His words caused all the children who had previously grouped up around Huiyu to move to Dengwu instantly. A smile appeared on his face as he started describing with elaborate words the world which he came from.
You feel familiar,
Xingye suddenly said as he sat next to Dengwu.
It's something I have not felt for thousands of years.
The words greatly shocked everyone present, as none of them expected the small child to be vastly older than all of them. Yet suddenly his starry eyes shone with excitement as all the children looked at Dengwu with great admiration.
"Father, is that you?"
Dongji suddenly asked, his icy eyes gleaming with excitement.
"It feels like father,"
Xingye agreed, and within seconds all the children were sniffing Dengwu, touching him and hugging him. Tears started sprouting within their eyes as happiness seemed to fill them all.
"Father finally returned to us!"
Xiaji exclaimed and threw herself into Dengwu's embrace like a lost child finally finding her father. Seated with 4 children in his arms, Dengwu was genuinely shocked, and his face was filling with dread. The whole scene was so unexpected, yet, knowing Dengwu and his womanizing ways, no one seemed more suitable for the situation than he did. Laughter suddenly rang through the clearing as Wang Zhulong no longer could hold back. Her bright voice broke the stunned silence, causing the others to laugh together with her. Laughter which contained both shock and confusion. "Oh, right," Lanfeng finally spoke from within the Dantian cave after having been silent for days on end. "The seasons were supposed to live in this part of the dungeon. I see Xingyu here, but I wonder what happened to Sun. She should be here to look after the kids." Chapter 5. Laws. "Son?" Huiyu asked curiously as he heard Lan Feng's comments, and the phoenix finally started speaking. "When our forefathers created this plane, they created a sun and a moon. Those two split the year in half, with each taking responsibility for half a year. This was how the seasons were born. Sun would enter meditation, where she would meditate for half a year. Meditation allows for her to become one with the world, and through her care flowers bloom and spring arrives. During the half year she is meditating, her cultivation soars, and the world feels her presence more and more as the days go by. This is why spring is not as warm as summer." Lanfeng paused slightly to see if Huiyu understood. With a nod from the white-haired boy, the phoenix continued. "When Sun manages to merge with the world fully, her powers are at their strongest. At this time the sun is at its most radiant, sending her warmth to the surface.
As soon as she reaches the apex, the moon will come and take over. He will enter isolated meditation, and when he reaches his peak, winter will be upon us. It is autumn now, so moon should be meditating, but that means sun should be here to look after their children, the seasons.
If sun has 4 children, then who is Xingyu? Huiyu asked curiously. He was not a season, but instead the night sky.
Xingyu was created by our forefathers along with sun and moon. As long as he lives, the stars will always be shining.
Upon pausing slightly, Lan Feng's brows were furrowed. He pondered how to explain something as profound as what they were currently talking about. Are you sure she is not just somewhere else? Huiyu asked quizzically. Yet upon seeing the phoenix shake his head, a frown appeared on his forehead, as he observed the 5 children who were all playing with Deng Wu, happiness evident in their eyes as they remembered a time long gone. Xingyu, Huiyu called out, and the child instantly turned around, his face beaming with happiness as the many stars within his eyes shone brightly. Where is Sun? Huiyu asked curiously. Yet as soon as he asked, a tense atmosphere appeared in the clearing. Looking at Huiyu, hope seemed to flourish within the eyes of the small child.
Mother was taken away,
the small boy said with a depressed voice as he shook his head in despair. But moments later he no longer seemed sad. It was as though he could not stay depressed for long.
I did not plan for you to deal with something this serious just yet, Lan Feng complained. But Huiyu could feel excitement bubbling up within the phoenix, and he instantly understood that this had turned into training for him and his friends. Huiyu was suddenly daunted by the thought of having to save Sun. Sun was the one who granted summer and spring to the world, alongside allowing humans to survive. Sun had to be incredibly strong, yet even she was caught. How could Huiyu possibly help? Yet no matter how worried and unsure Huiyu was, he felt more and more excitement and determination within Lan Feng's soul, which caused Huiyu to sigh. Although he felt he was not ready for the task just yet, Huiyu had promised the phoenix that he would follow any orders given when it came to training. Making Huiyu strong would definitely benefit Lan Feng on his road for revenge. Huiyu said nothing as he stood to the side and started looking for tents within his storage stones, which he then set up in the clearing. After setting up the tents, he started a bonfire where he began cooking food for the children and his friends. Sha Yun quickly understood that they were planning to stay for a bit, but Huiyu had not told her his plans yet, causing the snake woman to be slightly confused. She looked at Huiyu with tender eyes before she slithered into the forest where she picked up branches to use for the bonfire. Although she would have preferred cooking, she knew that Huiyu would decline her offer. Soon the smell of stew drifted out from the pot, and the season's stomachs growled as drool dripped from the corners of their mouths. Seeing how the children finally released Deng Wu, the friends laughed. Within a short while, everyone was eating their stew while chatting with each other. Huiyu intentionally placed himself next to Xingyu. "Can you tell me what happened when your mother was taken?" Huiyu asked gently as he filled the boy's plate with plenty of meat. The boy's face only showed a trace of depression, before it became excited from seeing the glistening, tender meat on his plate. Coercing a child was something Huiyu felt capable of doing, even if that child was thousands of years old.
"She had just come out of meditation,"
Xingyu said while stuffing his face with stew, expertly avoiding the vegetables and only eating the meat.
"Mother says that we are not allowed to fight with the nearby villages unless they do something very bad. Mother had absorbed the energy from the heavens and earth, then they took her away."
"Why would they take her?" Huiyu asked quietly while trying to get as much information as possible from the small friend next to him. He already learned that Sun was taken away as soon as she left her isolated cultivation, and that she followed without putting up too much of a fight.
"They want her for the sake of increasing their harvest,"
Xingyu said with a sad expression on his face. Though as soon as his eyes fell on the pot which had been used to cook the stew, his smile resurfaced. "Don't be so shocked," Lan Feng commented when he felt how Hui Yu was quite astonished. "Their mother has disappeared, yet the children have done nothing about it this whole time." "They're not children," Lan Feng continued. "They are the laws which this world is built upon. They are the laws which the 4 divine beasts created at the same time they created the continent itself. We will meet many of these laws on our travels. They are laws created by the gods. To be created by a god makes it impossible for one to go against them. To go against a law is the same as going against this world. Imagine what would happen should the sun die and fall from the sky, should the moon never again raise the tides, should the seasons never change. These laws are far older than us. They are as ancient as the first rock in this world. The laws are all around us. It is the law that binds the world together, allowing for it to exist. When you become an Upper Danshan user, I will tell you far more about them, as you will begin to sense them." Hui Yu nodded his head. Right now he did not need to know more about the laws. What he did need to know about was what kind of people kidnapped Sun. "They should be from the closest village, so that we will go there after a few days of rest. Make sure that you train properly during these next few days. We cannot waste too much time on this." Getting her back here was of utmost importance before the 4 of them could move on to the next dungeon. Looking at their surroundings, Hui Yu could not help but wonder why this place was referred to as dungeons. It was obviously a whole new world which was spread out under the entire continent, but it did not look dead. Quite to the contrary, it was filled with living beings, trees, and plants. Even a sun and moon were present within the underworld kingdom they now traveled through. Having put all the kids to bed, Hui Yu was seated with his friends in front of the bonfire where they warmed themselves. Being beneath the earth and inside this cave, the stone walls which surrounded them sucked all the warmth which the sun had produced during the day. The moment the sun vanished, the warmth was slowly absorbed by the cave walls, and the previous comfortable temperature changed. At night, the cave would be filled with chilled, humid air, much like how the weather felt on an autumn night on the surface. "We need to rescue her. Or if she hasn't been captured, then at least we need to bring her back here," Hui Yu said as he finished passing on Lan Feng's words from earlier. Seated at the back, Hui Yu was contemplating the laws which had been mentioned earlier. Truthfully, Hui Yu understood that it was something which he should not encounter until he reached the Upper Danshan. He felt as though it was impossible to comprehend such things before his Upper Danshan was opened, yet at the same time, there were these thoughts just out of reach. Thoughts that made Hui Yu feel as though he would understand some of it, at least if he were able to think just a little more. But no matter how much time Hui Yu spent thinking, that feeling remained. He never caught hold of what exactly the laws were. With a sigh, he stood up and decided to think about it when he had more time. "Let's go," Hui Yu said with a low voice before he turned around and gestured for the friends to follow him. Silent as a shadow, the 4 young cultivators made their way through the forest and moved towards the village which had taken Sun. Following the path set down by Lan Feng, Hui Yu quickly passed on information which he was being given on the way. The village was not a big one, as approximately 100 people lived in it. They all earned their living through agriculture, and Lan Feng assumed that Sun had been caught for the sake of increasing their harvest by a noticeable margin. Having gained every bit of information, Hui Yu and the others nodded their heads. They felt like they were much more prepared now than they had been before. Rushing towards the village, they hoped to get into contact with Sun without anyone noticing them, and then they would convince her to return to the cabin to once more look after the seasons. The forest they traveled through was dense, and only allowed one to see a few meters in front of them. Yet suddenly all the trees vanished. Looking around, one could tell that they were clearly removed to clear land for agriculture. As soon as Hui Yu saw this, he raised his hand and gestured at the others to stop. Slowly, Hui Yu and his friends snuck closer and closer, and as they expected, a small village appeared outside the forest. However, as soon as the four of them broke through to the open clearing, they expected to see a village, but what they saw caused them all to stop in their tracks. They stood there, staring agape at fields which went on as far as the eye could see. Far off in the distance, a city rose with pagodas reaching towards the dungeon's ceiling. "Wow," Hui Yu said while looking at the city in the distance, and sighed deeply. "It seems that even things within this closed-off area have managed to evolve quite a bit in 4,000 years. Upon hearing this, the three others solemnly nodded their heads. A blank look was present in their eyes, as all the plans they had prepared beforehand had become completely useless. "We won't get anything done by standing here," Hui Yu said after a short while, and he started walking towards the city. "Let us change our plans slightly. Our first goal is to locate Sun." Having said that, Hui Yu walked with steady steps towards the city in the distance. His friends quickly caught up to him as they walked on in silence. Chapter 6. Village Turned City. Leaving the forest, Hui Yu maintained his silence. His vigilant blue eyes narrowed slightly as they observed everything which was happening around him, shining out in the dim light the moon cascaded down upon them. The fields were empty. Tools were stacked up at the corner of each field. The farmers had left them before they had retreated back into the city itself at dusk. The city was shining with light that was visible from far away. No wall was surrounding this place. Instead, there were many farmhouses on the outskirts of the city with animals resting inside the small barns. The eerie silence would occasionally be interrupted by the sound of weak and domesticated demon beasts growling or howling into the air in response to the scent and sounds of the young people who were making their way along the dusty streets. The houses all seemed to be built from high-quality wood, and they all were well looked after. None of them were worn down, nor were they destroyed by attacks of demon beasts. By the look of the houses alone, one could tell that this city had a very safe environment when it came to magical beast attacks. Walking on the streets, Hui Yu noticed that although light was streaming out the windows, no one was walking on the streets, leaving them completely deserted. Happy voices could be heard from within the houses, causing a frown to appear on Hui Yu's face. Everyone seemed happy, yet no one left their homes. The white-haired young man grew increasingly alert. A tense atmosphere was growing between them as the four friends slowly made their way past the farmhouses and towards the urban areas of the city, all aiming to find an inn. Walking further into the town caused them to become even more vigilant in their observation of their surroundings. Even in the town, no one was walking on the streets. Only the light and laughter from within the houses streamed into the empty world where Hui Yu and his friends quickly passed by. Making a swift decision, Hui Yu made a gesture with his hand, and all four turned around. None of them said a word. They were all as quiet as shadows while they retreated out of the city once more. The sun was rising in the sky by the time the four once more made it back to the forest where they gathered behind the trees. They were hiding for the sake of not allowing any citizens to see them waiting. As the sun rose in the sky, Huiyu was seated quietly in the shadows of the forest. There he observed how the workers appeared under the rising sun, which allowed for few rays of light to shine down upon them. The weather was exactly like a usual autumn day, and the workers seemed to plow the soil and plant the seeds with a routine that long since had been ingrained into them. There was absolutely no sign of additional sunshine or amazing energy ripples which one would have expected from having sun, one of the strongest laws, held captive. From what he had been told, sun should have been taken to this city. He had expected that this would result in the city being filled with sunshine, radiating boundless heat. Yet looking at the city in the fields, one would not be able to tell this place was any different from any other city during autumn. Having waited a couple of hours, Huiyu finally rose to his feet and stretched his stiff body before a splendid smile appeared upon his face. "Let us see how they welcome visitors," he said, as he turned around and with steady and confident steps walked towards the fields and the citizens. Walking out from the forest, not many of the farmers noticed them initially. However, with each step they took, more and more farmers would stop in their tracks as they stared at Huiyu and the others, their mouths agape as though they had seen a ghost. Seeing that the farmers had such a reaction but did nothing to stop them, Huiyu just kept smiling his blinding smile and nodded or winked now and then to the pretty girls who were walking in the fields. The calm and carefree expression which Huiyu showed was impossible to be mirrored by any of the others. Seeing Huiyu walk at the front with the three others behind, especially someone as exotic as Sha Yun, the farmers instantly took Huiyu to be someone they should not mess with. Instead, the girls to whom he nodded got red cheeks and felt their hearts flutter as this esteemed person had shown them favor. Great curiosity as to who this person was and from where his entourage appeared caused many of the farmers to follow them. As they made their way to the city at a leisurely pace, Huiyu attentively showed interest in everything around him. From the very start, only a few farmers had seen them, yet by the time they made it to the farmhouses, they had an entourage of over 200 farmers following them. Yet even while so many were following behind him, Huiyu still walked at a leisurely pace, as though he was used to having this many followers. Respect grew within the three friends as his demeanor changed completely into that of a young master. Even the aloof Wang Zhulong had to admit that she was slightly uncomfortable with showing her back to this many unknown farmers, and some strains of displeasure were visible on her face. This, in turn, further fueled the theory of Huiyu being a young master who was traveling with his magical beast and 2 retainers. Although Huiyu was moving slowly to assume the posture of a young master who feared nothing, he also walked slowly to observe everything around them in the daylight. These farmers clearly belonged in the farmhouses. People from within the houses quickly gathered along with their families, whispering to one another, causing the many voices to group together into the loudest murmurs Huiyu had ever heard before. The farmers' houses were of good quality, but even so, Huiyu was able to tell that these were the lowest ranked within the city, information he made sure to note down. Looking around, Huiyu frowned as he quickly exited the areas where animals were held, and his speed once more slowed down as he entered a paved road with smaller, yet clearly better houses. Entering this area, they now came as far as they had the night before. Yet everything was the complete opposite of what it had been, causing Huiyu to chuckle slightly. The chuckle was, however, quickly changed to a frown as he looked around but could not locate an inn. Walking further, the houses were replaced with mansions. Eventually, Huiyu and the entourage were in the middle of town, looking at an astonishing pagoda. There was no expression of amazement on Huiyu's face. Instead, a look of annoyance could be seen, as though he had not even noticed the beautiful pagoda. Bringing up all his courage, a young man stepped forward and cleared his throat. Yu intentionally ignored it a few times before he finally turned around and looked at the youth with a noble but gentle expression in his face. "Can I help you?" Yu's voice broke through the air like a sharp sword through a body, cutting right into the bone, deadly yet so beautiful and alluring, such that everyone would gladly listen just to hear it once more. Swallowing a few times, the youngster opened his mouth and stuttered, "My lord, is there anything I can do for you?" Looking at the young man, Yu noticed how he cowered in front of what he thought to be a young master, and the white-haired young man almost pitied him. Yet in his world the ones who mattered to him were his friends and himself. He had already learned that within this world mercy was a luxury he could not afford. "I am looking for an inn," Yu said, his voice floating over every peasant who had followed him so far. Yet the square no longer only contained farmers. It included every kind of citizen within the small city. But as soon as they heard the word inn, a collective gasp sounded out, followed by loud murmurs. Yu frowned as he saw that, and the man he had spoken with earlier was looking at Yu with the veneration equal to that of a dog to its master. From within the crowd, sentences such as, "He is from a city with inns," and "He is used to resting in an inn," could be heard. Deep inside, Yu could not help but be fairly shocked when he saw such a strong reaction to something as small as an inn. But outside he showed nothing in his facial expression. Instead, he looked around impatiently as multiple citizens had gained the courage to appear in front of him. "Perhaps your lordship would consider staying at my humble abode?" a man asked very politely. Yet before Yu had the time to answer, another person pushed his way in front and asked the same question. Within a few moments, a fight had broken out. This caused even the guards of the city to force their way into the middle of the horde to try to break the fight up. Yet little did it help. Yu looked at the disciple-ranked guards and sighed. "Take care of it," Yu said, his voice seemingly arrogant and ordering. But as soon as they heard the order, Deng Wu, Wang Zhulong, and Sha Yun all moved forward, ready to do just that. It was not that Yu usually spoke to his friends in such an arrogant way, but the fact was all three had fallen into the roles which the audience had assumed for them. The surrounding audience quickly retreated as they saw the three walking towards the fighting people. Sha Yun let out a low hiss in displeasure as she had to work. With a sweep of her tail, three men were instantly blown out of the bundle of fighting men. One of the three was thrown so far back that he landed on top of two other citizens who were watching the fight. All three of them crashed to the ground. Blood sprayed everywhere, and the white from broken bones was visible in the cluster of flesh and clothes the poor spectators had turned into. The two others were not as lucky, but the audience was relieved. As soon as they landed against the pagoda, blood splurted from their mouths, and both slumped down, collapsing on the ground with no signs of life. It was a selfish relief which flooded through the audience. Although some of the citizens died, they died on their own, not dragging innocent bystanders with them to their death. The smell of blood caused the fight to halt, and shock was plastered on their faces as they saw the unfortunate people who had been picked up by Sha Yun. Even more shocked were they when they saw the menacing expression on her beautiful face. It was obvious that she was strongly opposing the fighting they had seen. The guards were standing still, fear freezing their limbs as they contemplated what they should do with the young master who had appeared with such a strong force. They all knew that if they were to go against him, they were not his match. It was not until now that Yu noticed that all the citizens were around the student rank, while the guards were practitioners. In the entire area around the pagoda, no one seemed to have even unlocked the middle dantian. Everyone were completely quiet and shocked. Yet from the distance, Yu noticed a ruckus as someone tried to make their way to the center. His attention was on them from the very start, and an interesting gleam appeared in his eyes, the smile never once leaving his lips. The ones who were coming were all practitioner-ranked experts. Hui Yu guessed that within this city, that was considered a rather high cultivation base. Yet this group was nothing more than an appetizer for Dengwu's soul shadows. Breaking through the horde of humans, a group of 20 men made it to the square where Hui Yu was currently standing leisurely, while his friends were by his side, ready to attack the arrivals should Hui Yu wish for it. The 20 new arrivals were clearly all of a different rank than the guards which had appeared so far. Their uniforms were all in a bright red color, with golden trim, and their faces were very arrogant. However, as soon as they laid eyes upon Hui Yu, shock was evident in their expressions, and the man in front took a few steps forward. "Young lord," his voice still had slight arrogance within, yet he showed all signs of courtesy as he bowed to Hui Yu. "The city lord would like to welcome you to our humble city." Chapter 7. The City Lord. Upon issuing the invitation, "The city lord would like to welcome you to our humble city," the red-uniformed guard deepened his humble bow. "Please follow me to the city lord's mansion, where you may take up residency for as long as you wish." Hui Yu nodded in reply and slowly followed the guards. Everyone who previously followed closely behind them now spread out to allow them an easy passage. None of them could easily forget how the snake woman had just killed at least 3 men with one swipe of her tail. Hui Yu once more walked at a leisurely pace through the town, observing everything around him. He quickly noticed that they had taken a roundabout way to reach the city lord's mansion. Despite this, Hui Yu understood the layout of the streets. The city lord's mansion was small in comparison to the one from Riloa City, yet the size was still quite large. It was definitely larger than the mansion that Hui Yu had bought. Walking out of the mansion, more red-uniformed guards appeared, all of which were at the practitioner rank. They showed the utmost respect towards Hui Yu and his followers. The leader, who was walking in front, seemed proud to be leading the way. Walking past several residences, they finally arrived at a city hall, where they were led inside. This open hall had no separations, only elaborately carved wooden pillars. At the end of the hall, 5 seats were placed, and in the center was a middle-aged man seated with 2 gray-haired men on either side of him. Black shining hair and a beard adorned the middle-aged man's face, framing his intelligent but haughty eyes as he looked at Hui Yu with great interest. The robe he wore was clearly made from material much more luxurious than that of any of the citizens. Even the guards' red uniforms seemed somewhat lackluster next to him. Golden threads had been used to make an embroidery of the 4 divine beasts. 2 were on the front of his garment, while the other 2 were on the back. Looking at this man, Hui Yu estimated him to be around the same rank as himself, and each of the elders was a slightly higher rank. It had to be said that although the elders were of higher rank, they had clearly seen days when they had been stronger, making it impossible for any of them now to utilize their cultivation base fully. None of them were Grand Master ranked or above. At most, they were 9-star masters, much like Dengwu. These 5 men observed Hui Yu and his entourage with mixed expressions, one with arrogance, one with veneration, and the other with surprise. It was obvious that youths were never so highly ranked in cultivation here. While some were surprised and awed by this, others felt arrogance as the youths too had reached the same level, showing that they were in no way inferior. Considering that these elders had life experiences, giving them much more wisdom than such youths, it made them feel especially superior. It was evident that the city lord himself felt that he was much more impressive than Hui Yu and his group, causing Hui Yu to inwardly laugh with disdain. Although the city lord was higher ranked than Hui Yu, his life experience was far from Hui Yu's. It was obvious that this city was isolated from the rest of the dungeons of the divine, but how or why was something that Hui Yu knew nothing about. Looking at Hui Yu with arrogance shining from his eyes, the city lord slightly nodded his head in greeting, which Hui Yu mirrored. He decided to show only as much courtesy to this man as he got. Seeing that Hui Yu had neither clasped his hands nor bowed to the city lord, made the city lord's brows furrow in annoyance. Yet he said nothing. Not even when he noticed that the white-haired young man's entourage was even less polite, not even greeting him with the slightest look. Still, he said nothing. Hui Yu's entourage, all three, were busily observing their surroundings while preparing an escape, should the need arrive.
"Young master," the city lord finally opened his mouth. His face was forced into a welcoming and polite expression, but Hui Yu could tell that he was not very used to greeting guests. This city truly seemed to be isolated from the rest of the underground world.
"It would be our pleasure to allow you and your friends to stay with us for as long as you wish. We are setting up a banquet tonight. Perhaps you would like to join us."
Acting as though he was contemplating, Hui Yu paused for a slight moment before a smile spread on his face. "That would be my honor. But for me to join you, I wish to bring my friends with me. Being in a new place, they would never allow me to go alone." Such a request was only natural. The city lord had already surmised that he would have no way of inviting only this boy with a decent cultivation technique, so he nodded his head in confirmation. Every time his eyes landed on Sha Yun, conflicting emotions were visible on his face. There was a gleam of lust mixed with arrogance and curiosity. Sha Yun was clearly not your average human, but it seemed as though the city lord did not think that she was a magical beast. It was possible she could be a human from another tribe that had changed throughout the years. Wrestling himself from his deep thoughts, the city lord stood up and walked towards Hui Yu. His eyes glanced towards Sha Yun multiple times, as though he could never get enough of seeing her, yet at the same time knew it was inappropriate. The snake woman's eyes were narrowed in displeasure, and her usually beautiful lips were curled into a sneer. She felt deep enmity towards this city lord who showed only the minimum amount of respect towards Hui Yu. But Sha Yun did nothing apart from sneering and glaring at the black-haired city lord, who was now advancing, soon to be standing next to Hui Yu. "We thank the city lord for his generosity," Hui Yu said with a clear voice, in no way intimidated by the taller and much sturdier man.
"Please call me Liu Wei."
The voice was filled with friendliness and flattery, so much that Hui Yu fought hard not to roll his eyes at the older man. Instead, he clasped his hands and made a slight bow towards the city lord, introducing himself. "I am Zhang Xiao." Hui Yu did not have any positive feelings about these elders nor the city lord, making him come up with the most generic name he could think of. A sigh of relief was breathed internally as Hui Yu noticed how the others showed no surprise upon hearing the name. Although these elders were no longer in their prime, they were still able to see through even small lies by observing the facial expressions of the ones in question. Hearing the name, Lord Liu Wei once more nodded his head as he spread his arms open in an attempt to seem even friendlier.
"As long as you stay in my mansion, you are welcome anywhere you wish to go. The servants will help you find your housing."
He gestured to some of the servants. Hui Yu nodded as he got ready to follow them. "We'll see you at the banquet tonight." Hui Yu smiled as he turned around and moved away together with his friends. As soon as Hui Yu's shadow vanished and he was out of sight, the smile disappeared from the city lord's face, replaced by annoyance.
"Why would so many high-ranked experts appear here?"
he asked with furrowed brows.
"They must have come from beyond the tunnels,"
another elder said, his face twisted in displeasure.
"Beyond the tunnels?"
Lord Liu Wei's face turned ashen as he asked the question. Before any of the elders had time to answer, he shook his head, a determined expression appearing on his face.
"They cannot have come from beyond the tunnels," he said with a steady expression. "His group appeared from the forest side of our land. It would not have been possible for them to sneak across our entire city without attracting attention, so they must be from the forest. Could there be a village left within the forest that managed to salvage some cultivation techniques?
After hearing the suggestion, all the elders' eyes opened wide, and one of them started panting slightly in greed. All of them knew how hard it was to cultivate with no techniques. Each person had to find their own way of cultivation specialized for themselves. But their way was nowhere near efficient enough to produce youngsters like Zhang Xiao. Finally, the elder seated right next to Lord Lu Wei sighed deeply as he said, "Let us see what they have to say during the banquet." Hearing his voice, everyone present in the room nodded their heads in unison before they split up, deciding to get themselves and the mansion ready for the banquet they had promised the newly arrived guests. While the elders were discussing the newly arrived guests, the group of youngsters had followed the servant tasked with showing them their courtyard. Looking around, Hui Yu had to admit that although this place was underground and a lot smaller than Riloa City, it was far from a small place, and mapping out the area took him much longer than expected. The young people finally arrived at a courtyard where they all sat down quietly. The rooms were filled with memory stones which recorded anything that happened, yet fortunately enough these memory stones were not able to record audio, so they slowly started discussing their future plans, now that they had finally found a place to stay. On the surface world, a frenzied search had been going on for the better part of 4 months, trying to locate one youngster who had disappeared from the face of the earth. This youngster was obviously Hui Yu, and the search was started by the royal family, who wished to discuss which methods the white-haired youngster had been practicing, so that they themselves could hope to reach saint rank at such a young age. At first, the royal family assumed that the experts within Riloa City lied. They felt embarrassed by having a king-ranked expert killed by a mere master-ranked expert. However, as soon as they used the truth potions on these experts, they found that it was, in fact, a saint who had appeared that fateful day. Unfortunately, this expert disappeared as quickly as he had appeared. The royal family ordered everyone within Riloa City to keep quiet about Hui Yu and his rank. However, some rumors had already left the city, causing ripples to appear within the usually silent Taiyang Kingdom. Fortunately, these rumors ended as just that. Everyone heard about this amazing youth who had reached the saint rank before he had been 20 years of age, yet no one knew where he was now, nor if in fact this was true or not. Everyone quickly agreed that it was started by the experts of Riloa City for the sake of fame, or to explain the disaster of a great 100 names king-ranked expert being killed by his son. The royal kingdom had sent a handful of their silent ravens to every corner of the kingdom, yet not one had emerged with even the slightest trace of the genius youth and his friends.
"What do you mean he disappeared?" Zhang Fei's voice was raised much more than usual. His handsome, youthful face twisted in annoyance as the frozen man standing in front of him shrugged his shoulders.
"We lost track of him after the battle for City Lord of Riloa City,"
the frozen man explained once more. Although it was obvious that Zhang Fei was his superior, he showed no signs of fear upon seeing the agitated young man.
"Good, very good,"
Zhang Fei said while leaning back against his icy throne. His face was unemotional as he pondered slightly, and suddenly a brilliant smile lit up the room.
"Let us see just how long he can stay hidden. Send the 7 Crusaders out to find him."
Chapter 8. Being a Guest. Seated within the courtyard, Hui Yu let out a deep sigh as he no longer emitted the haughtiness from before. Instead, he once more seemed like a calm and collected youth who was stunningly beautiful, but his noble air had disappeared. "We will have to stay here for some time," Hui Yu said apologetically as he looked around. He noted every location of the recording stones. Then he started to destroy them, one after another, with the help of black blood. Infusing it with spiritual energy, Hui Yu threw the dagger which landed on the stones with precision, after which he recalled it by activating the spiritual energy that was stored within.
After having removed every stone in their new residence, a big smile appeared on his face. A satisfied sigh escaped his lips as he leaned back against a tree, happiness evident on his face. As far as we know, Sun should be within this city right now. As they all sat down, Huiyu stated their reason for entering the city. At first I was slightly hesitant to enter this place because I feared our strength would not be enough. However, looking at these cultivators, I think we are safe, even though our foundation is still rather unstable after the spiritual energy spring. Pausing for a bit, Huiyu looked around. We need to find Sun, but we know nothing about her. We don't know what she looks like, we don't even know if Sun is her real name, nor do we know why they brought her here. All we can do for now is to slowly investigate in a way that they won't guess that we are planning something. Huiyu looked stern for a short time as he knew that, although they were higher ranked than the majority of the cultivators in the city, it would not be a very good idea to abuse this strength to fight the citizens just because they had not been careful enough. Let's try and see how much information we can get from them tonight at the banquet. Then tomorrow we will try and enter the markets and see if we can buy some information. I am sure that everything we brought from the surface will be able to sell incredibly well in this place with such low cultivating. The group all nodded their heads. Anything from inscriptions, even the weakest, which could only spark a fire, to simple and weak martial arts skills could all be sold for a fortune. One could guess how much they would be able to earn should they feel like selling cultivation techniques. Huiyu was, however, not willing to sell anything which would change the lives of these citizens. He still felt guilty for providing the Deng family with the means to revolt, as he had given them the mechanism used in the watermills. Not only the Deng family, but also the Rong family had changed severely due to the technology Huiyu had given them from his old world. His sudden thought about sharing his knowledge, which he previously had given out because of gratitude, had changed the lives of thousands upon thousands of citizens within Riloa City, not to mention the many casualties as a result of the war. Knowing that he was partially at fault had caused Huiyu to put himself at risk for the sake of ending the fighting in Riloa City once and for all. Although it ended with Deng Wu personally executing his own father and Wang Zhulong losing her father as well, Huiyu knew that neither of them blamed him. But he still blamed himself, and this caused him to be much more tight-lipped with everything he knew. His knowledge was only for himself to use, and in the worst-case scenario he would share it with his very closest friends, but only if they were in a life-or-death situation. This regret was the reason Huiyu only allowed Deng Wu and the others to sell items with next to no value on the surface when selling at the markets the following day. Well, that is for tomorrow, Huiyu ended up saying. Tonight we are going to be guests at the banquet, so we better get dressed, Huiyu said, laughing as he picked out a celestial blue cloak with silver embroidery created from the finest materials which money could buy. Donning the celestial cloak, Huiyu once more looked like a young master. Deng Wu could not help but laugh a little at the transformation. He then quickly picked out a black robe with a red belt that had red embroidery on the edges. This was also made from the finest material, making Deng Wu's status seem no less than Huiyu's. Wang Zhulong owned no clothes for women, but she too dressed up in a beautiful golden robe with red and orange embroidery of phoenixes, causing Lan Feng to approve of her style. Looking at the three young masters, Sha Yun snorted in disdain. She was an enchantress, and she prided herself on her good looks. So when she removed her cloak, Sha Yun instantly found some jewelry which she wore on top of her alluring and scaled figure. "One day you ought to make some small snake babies," Lan Feng said with a dreamy voice as he enjoyed the exquisite beast in front of him. Even Huiyu could feel a dangerous heat rising from within, and he quickly looked away, much to Sha Yun's displeasure. Coughing awkwardly, Huiyu turned back to see a knowing smile on Deng Wu's face, a slight blush on Sha Yun's cheeks as she looked at him coquettishly, and Wang Zhulong was impatiently stomping the ground as she was anything but satisfied. As to why she was so unhappy, she blamed it on the stupid snake for showing off her figure. Although Wang Zhulong was a woman, she would never try to be so alluring. For some reason, it rubbed her the wrong way every time Sha Yun caused the two men within the group to become strange. Hui Yu, taking his cue from the stomping foot, instantly straightened out his expression and released the blue mist from within his dantian, allowing his entire being to be enveloped in tranquility. A sudden hint of a smile was visible on his face, and his eyes once more had a haughty expression, as though everything was beneath him. By his side were Wang Zhulong and Sha Yun, while Deng Wu had decided to walk behind him, covering his back. Most people were unable to trust a person who had killed his own father, but Hui Yu trusted Deng Wu with his life. The young man behind him had had the opportunity to kill him multiple times, yet he never even told Hui Yu's secret to anyone. Although Deng Wu was a flirt, he was reliable in the strangest situations, and this was one of those. Hui Yu was willing to give his all for Deng Wu's attempt to save his clan. In turn, Deng Wu was willing to give his life for the sake of Hui Yu. Deng Wu and Wang Zhulong had both been banished from Riloa City, but they had managed to succeed in their goal of allowing their families to continue living. As such, both were eternally grateful for Hui Yu and his assistance. Both had since then decided that the rest of their lives would belong to the white-haired boy. To their surprise, this young boy they followed was someone who was taking them on a journey across the land and exploring places no one else had ever seen. All these thoughts were swirling around inside Deng Wu's head as he walked behind Hui Yu. He firmly swore to himself that he would follow this young friend of his, even if it meant an early grave for himself. Hui Yu, completely unaware of the important oath Deng Wu just made with himself, was chatting merrily with Sha Yun. During this time, the air around him caused everyone within the city lord's mansion to keep their distance from him as he moved closer and closer towards the main hall. The main hall, which previously was just one empty room with 5 throne-like chairs at the back, was now filled with one large table which was placed in a square in the middle of the room. Cushions were put on the floor all around the table, inviting the guests to sit down. The table itself was filled with all kinds of delicacies. Hui Yu could not help but feel slightly impressed by this banquet which they had managed to produce within such a short time frame. Hui Yu sat down and noticed how the city lord Lu Wei sat down next to him. Deng Wu quickly moved to sit on Hui Yu's other side, not allowing the elders to follow suit and isolate Hui Yu from his retainers. In the end, Hui Yu had Deng Wu by his side, who in turn had Sha Yun seated next to him, and then finally Wang Zhulong. On Hui Yu's other side was Lu Wei, and next to him the 5 elders in a row. Apart from these 9 people, there were a lot of people of high status from within this interesting city, mainly noble families, yet none of them piqued Hui Yu's interest as they all relied on the lower dantian. Hui Yu was deeply confused. He did not understand why someone as strong as Sun would follow such weaklings to a city where they did not even seem to use her powers.
"Perhaps you could enlighten me as to where you are from?" Lu Wei asked curiously, as he grabbed various trays of food and offered them to Hui Yu, who politely accepted. Hearing the question, Hui Yu could not help but chuckle slightly.
"Where do you think I am from, Lord Lu Wei?" The question completely took the city lord aback. He was quite shocked not to receive a straight answer. Currently, the city lord was confident that Hui Yu had not arrived from beyond the tunnels, yet he had no way of knowing where else he could have come from. This cave was known as the final destination within their world, yet somehow a person had appeared from out of nowhere, and he was not a nobody.
"I would guess that you are from beyond the tunnels, yet I am curious as to whether or not I am correct," the city lord asked, trying to tempt Hui Yu into saying that he was indeed not from the tunnels.
To his disappointment, the white-haired boy was not new to being interrogated, as he had experienced it a lot from his girlfriends in his old world. A complacent expression was visible on Huiyu's face as he answered, "Where else would we have come from?" The question was a simple one, yet as soon as it left Huiyu's lips, a collective shiver ran through the bodies of Lord Lu Wei and his elders. Everyone who came from beyond the tunnels was indeed terrifying cultivators. These youngsters were in no way geniuses compared to the last delegation that appeared from the tunnels.
"I apologize, young master."
Lord Lu Wei no longer dared to behave haughtily in front of Huiyu in fear of offending him.
"Pardon me for asking, but are you here due to personal interest, or as a delegation from the Dragon Corps?"
Looking at Huiyu, everyone at the table held their breath, their hearts racing in their chests and their eyes widened in fear. The seconds felt as if they lasted for hours, every pair of eyes glued to Huiyu. Laughing slightly, Huiyu took his time to answer, pressing the anticipation to its limit before he finally opened his mouth and answered, "I wish to see the world on the other side of the tunnels." His voice was calm and filled with youthful yearning for different places. "I am here for personal reasons. Don't get any funny ideas, though," he warned them. "My family is aware of where I am." Chapter 9. Dried Strips of Meat. The unsaid threat hung in the air, yet everyone wore expressions of relief. A slight frown appeared on Huiyu's face as he did not notice any signs of worry about his final words. It seemed as though the Dragon Corps were very fearsome indeed. The frown disappeared almost as soon as it arrived. Huiyu's friends managed to notice it and made a mental note to remember the name Dragon Corps. The following day, when they needed to look for information, that was definitely one of the things they would investigate. Although not much had been said at the banquet, Huiyu had already gotten two important pieces of information. One was the unknown tunnels where experts apparently lived on the other side, while the second piece of information was the Dragon Corps. Thinking about the information given, Huiyu came up with various theories, but one thing was certain. The cave that they were in was combined with at least one other cave where cultivators lived and controlled the surroundings. The Dragon Corps was something which Huiyu felt must have something to do with the Azure Dragon, since these dungeons were located beneath the Azure Dragon's kingdom. However, were they remnants left behind from the time when the Azure Dragon himself walked the earth, or had they taken the name due to other reasons? Curiosity flooded Huiyu. He was very anxious to go and see these tunnels on his own, but he knew that before moving further into the dungeons, he needed to find Sun and return her to the other laws. Suddenly, from within his mind, a small ray of sunshine opened up the discussion about laws, and Huiyu felt as though he finally understood something. Hanging on to that thought for dear life, Huiyu managed to get through the rest of the banquet with pleasantries and nice conversation for a couple of hours before standing up and apologizing for retiring early. He was exhausted from his travel, and no one at the table dared to say anything in return. Only polite nods and friendly smiles were given as he rushed back to the courtyard. Following behind, his friends had long since noticed that something was different from usual. The three of them looked out for anything that might be slightly out of the ordinary, as Huiyu's only thought was on returning to the courtyard. Fortunately, the trip was over with no troubles. Huiyu arrived safely at the courtyard, where he instantly sat down in a meditational position, closed his eyes, and submerged himself in the brilliant enlightenment he had experienced during the banquet. Looking at Huiyu, sighs were heard, but they quickly changed to giggles as the three friends looked at each other. Huiyu was definitely the one who had gathered them all together. They had been together with him for years at the academy. They had fought the Battle of Reloa City. They had managed to overcome the trauma of killing many people and also banishment from their home. During the months-long travel, they had gotten to know a side of Huiyu they had not noticed before. One of these things was his hunger for breakthroughs. As soon as he gained enlightenment, he would stop everything for the sake of meditating. It did not matter if he was in the middle of a stream or rushing through the fields. Usually the white-haired youth would only be meditating on his enlightenment for up to an hour, yet this time seemed different. As Hui Yu sat down to meditate, Sha Yun, Deng Wu, and Wang Zhulong all gathered around him, guarding him should these hosts suddenly change their opinion on how to treat the young master. 1 hour took another, and the dusk turned to dawn. The sun rose in the sky, and the morning broke upon them, bringing with it noises from a bustling city. Looking at Hui Yu, who had stayed in the same position during all these hours on end, Deng Wu finally stood up and stretched his sore, stiff body.
"It seems as if he will stay like that for quite some time," he commented while stretching some more. "I suggest that we split up. One of us should stay here and make sure that no one disrupts you, while the other two should go to the city for information." Hearing Deng Wu's suggestion, both Wang Zhulong and Sha Yun nodded their heads. Deng Wu thought for a bit before picking up Wang Zhulong to go with him into the city. Sha Yun was happy to stay back. She quickly settled down next to Hui Yu, ensuring that she did not in any way interrupt him with his meditation. Yet she ensured there were not many breadths of hair between the two. Wang Zhulong's face turned slightly sour, but quickly recovered its usual expression as she donned a black cloak, hiding her features. Deng Wu decided to wear something similar, and the two cloaked people vanished through the mansion gates. As soon as the two left the courtyard, followers appeared. However, their abilities were far too weak to stalk Deng Wu and Wang Zhulong. As soon as they had gone through the gates, the two cloaks faded into the crowd of people. Rushing through town, Deng Wu aimed for the marketplaces, but he was quickly stunned to find that everything within this city was different from what they had expected. There was no such thing as a marketplace. Instead, there was a corn distribution center. Going there, Deng Wu found that money did not exist within this city. Everyone shared what they had. All harvests were given to the city lord's mansion, who then shared it with every family within the city. Not to mention crafting jobs. Everyone did everything for free. There was such a thing as a noble family, yet noble families were seen as similar to the city lord, a family who shared all their harvests with the citizens. Everyone did their own job at their own time, but none of the citizens got paid even the smallest coin for doing so. Instead, they did it to be entitled to the weekly food distribution. After looking at it this way, a smile appeared on Deng Wu's face. Although there was no money in this city and everyone was eligible for food, a lot of them would not get enough if they were sick or orphans. Deng Wu instantly changed his plan, no longer aiming for merchants, but instead the poor areas in the city. The poor areas were the ones that they had seen first when they entered the city days before. As soon as the people saw Deng Wu and Wang Zhulong in their cloaked appearances, everyone vanished into their farmhouses. Deng Wu decided to stop in the middle of the street. Upon looking behind him for a few moments, a deep sigh could be heard from beneath the cloak. He quickly removed his cloak, allowing for his features to reappear. Although the adults were worried about his sudden appearance, especially since it was the face of a man they had never seen before, most of the children had less hesitation and rushed towards him as he knelt down on the ground and greeted them. From within his storage ring, a couple of strips of dried meat were suddenly produced. The eyes of the children grew with excitement, not only because of the meat, but also due to the way it had appeared out of nowhere. Chewing on one of the meat strips himself, Deng Wu shared them with the kids and laughed as they took them with grateful expressions. Within the houses, women started to appear in the doorways.
"Excuse me,"
one of the younger women finally dared to speak to Deng Wu. She stood with her arms crossed over her chest, a half-worried expression on her face.
"Can we help you with anything?"
she asked again. Her voice trembled slightly as she kept looking at Deng Wu, worried what he might do.
"As a matter of fact,"
Deng Wu spoke slowly and clearly, allowing all to hear what he was saying. I am looking for someone to answer some questions for me. I'll trade meat for information, but whatever I ask must remain a secret. Hearing the voice, more women came over. Deng Wu was invited into a house where he was able to speak with the women. Outside the door was Wang Zhulong, ensuring that no one who went in was someone unallowed to do so. The sun was setting behind the city before Deng Wu once more emerged from within the house, a satisfied expression on his face. With a nod to Wang Zhulong, Deng Wu once more covered himself with the black cloak before he started to travel back towards the courtyard. He was curious as to whether or not Hui Yu had woken up yet, as he had gotten quite a large amount of information. Hui Yu had been frantic. During the banquet, he had a flash of enlightenment. The longer he stayed with the hosts, the harder he struggled to remember the information which was so clear in the beginning. In the end, he had to leave the meal early under the excuse of having to return home to rest. Going back, Hui Yu could think of nothing but the phrases swirling within his mind. The words natural laws, gods, and way of cultivating. Hui Yu was grateful that he did not have to worry about his surroundings, as he knew that he was protected. The most important thing was for him to focus on his enlightenment, while his friends would deal with anything else. Seeing the courtyard come into his line of sight, a sigh of relief escaped Hui Yu. He instantly sat down, closed his eyes, and allowed his mental projection to enter the Danshan cave. There it entered into the deepest kind of meditation that Hui Yu currently possessed. Being submerged within himself, Hui Yu once more thought about the 3 phrases which had appeared from a golden beam of enlightenment. This world was based on natural laws. Each law was a certain property which could not be changed. The sun would rise in the sky during the day, only to be replaced by the moon at night. The wind would blow, and time would keep flowing no matter what happened to the continent and kingdoms. But the natural laws were not limited to the sun and the moon or the seasons and the weather. Everything was touched by these natural laws, and every law was predetermined, created by the gods. For a person to escape these laws, one had to become a god. One had to become a creator. The law of time made this hard. The law of death was always looming, but the law of cultivation was open for any human who wished to pursue their fortuity. Seated still, Hui Yu frowned as he understood some things, yet others were still far too profound for him to grasp. This world was filled with laws, and these laws had been created by the gods when they created the world. They were as old as the world, and they would live and die with the world. Although Sun had been taken away, her law was still true. This meant that as long as the world was standing, she, too, would survive. It was evident that saving her was purely a test given to him by Lan Fang in the hope of helping him improve his cultivation base. Chapter 10. Understanding the Basics. Everything within this world related to a law. There was a law for the sun and a law for the moon. There was a law for life and a law for death. Each element had its own law, much like how there were always clouds in the sky and a sky above the land. There were always laws. Even the heavens and the earth had laws of their own. The continent which Hui Yu lived on was nothing more than one small continent out of many in a world created by the 4 gods. Even something like cultivation had laws tied to it, and rules which a cultivator had to follow. When creating the world, what the gods had created was the laws, and from the laws appeared the world. Anyone who lived within this world would be bound by its laws, unless they managed to break through to the level of a god. Knowing this allowed for Yu to truly understand that the level of a god was not something attainable through cultivation alone. It was a level only achieved when an ultimate expert gained enlightenment into the world of a god. This was the reason why Lan Feng never managed to reach the rank of a god. He had been at the pinnacle of cultivation for years, but sadly his comprehension was lacking. He never understood the ultimate laws, the ways of the cosmos. This lack of understanding stopped Lan Feng from stepping into the rank he had aimed for all his life. Yu's mind was reeling from the vast amount of laws which existed within the world as he finally understood. Cultivation was the road which he had embarked upon, yet to become a god, an immortal, was not something which only cultivators were seeking. Immortals, the ones who lived forever, the ones who controlled the laws themselves. As a cultivator, Yu had carved the first steps within his journey to reach this goal. He was still so weak that even the weakest law was far stronger than he was. But a sudden thought sprouted within his mind as he realized that one did not have to be strong to reach immortality. One only needed to have comprehension far above the normal person. Even a newborn child could become immortal if they fully understood the laws of the cosmos. Meditating, Yu felt a strength welling up inside. This strength was far different from any he had felt before. It in no way increased his cultivation base. Instead, the silvery sea within his middle dantian gained a slight hue of gold. It was as though the sea itself understood that Yu's comprehension had soared by leaps and bounds. Yu's head hurt as the different laws entered his mind. Each law had a major law, and within those major laws existed various smaller laws. For instance, there was a law for the water element, but at the same time another law existed for the flow of water, and a separate one for the rain, the lakes, and the seas. Even though Yu was genuinely trying to grasp the knowledge which was flowing through his mind, he had a hard time understanding it, and some of it became vague. What was not vague was the knowledge that everything within this world consisted of laws, and that the laws were created by gods who could, in turn, break them. These laws were unlike humans, but they were still living creatures, which would survive as long as the world created by the gods was standing. These laws were far older than even Lan Feng. Opening his eyes, Yu looked confused as he saw Dengwu, Xiaoyun, and Wang Zhulong all sitting across from him. None of them were meditating. Instead, they all observed him intently. Knowing smiles were seen on all their faces, and Yu could not mask the confusion which spread across his face. This was not the first time that he had suddenly stopped doing other things for the sake of enlightenment, yet it somehow seemed as though they were treating it differently. "What's wrong?" Yu finally blurted out, as his curiosity got the better of him. His body was sore from being seated in the same position for a long time. He slowly rose to his feet, stretching as though he had never moved before. His entire body was shivering from unused energy. Both his spiritual energy sea and his chi spiral were bursting with energy, overflowing as though they had not been used for weeks. "Took your sweet time, huh?" Dengwu asked with a brilliant smile on his face, causing Yu to frown slightly. Having been so absorbed with the enlightenment of the laws, Yu had completely lost track of time. He had no clue how much time had passed. Seeing the confused expression, Xiaoyun instantly felt sorry for Yu. She slithered next to him, gently massaging his shoulders.
"You have been gone for 3 days,"
she said dangerously close to Yu's ear, allowing her snake-like tongue to slither in the air right next to the young man. Yu instantly wrested himself free from the gentle grip of Xiaoyun and sent her a warning glare. Yet the snake woman paid no heed, as she was observing her nails instead. Seeing that he was getting nowhere with the snake woman, Huiyu let out a sigh before he paid attention to what she had said. He raised an eyebrow in surprise, as he felt no different now than how he had felt before entering meditation. His body worked perfectly well. He was not hungry, nor felt like his body was in need of the natural bodily needs. Everything was exactly as it had been 3 days ago. The only thing which Huiyu could say was that the enlightenment must have ensured that his body gained the nourishment it needed. Suddenly a thought flashed in his mind, and a strange light appeared in his eyes. He no longer showed any interest in whether or not Sha Yun had been trying to flirt with him earlier, nor was the question about bodily functions important. Huiyu had received a glint of enlightenment, yet such a thing never appeared on its own. Usually he would gain enlightenment after a fight, or while pondering upon a hard question, or during his spiritual arts practice. This time the enlightenment had struck him in the middle of a banquet, when he had not been deep in thought about anything useful. Huiyu had gotten very few words about laws from Lan Fang. This was not enough to trigger such an immense enlightenment, especially since he was not pondering on it at the time of impact. The only thing which Huiyu could surmise was if he had had contact with something that had to do with the laws. That would be enough to trigger such a reaction. A smile spread on Huiyu's face as he felt that this was a lead to find Sun. Although Sun was not able to die, she was still a living creature, much like the other laws which Huiyu had met in the forest. He could not help but feel that this enlightenment was definitely connected to her. She had to be somewhere within the city lord's mansion. Seeing the smile on Huiyu's face, his friends around him also sprouted similar smiles. Huiyu only had such a cheeky expression on his face when he had found something which meant good luck for the rest of them. "So, do you want to hear what we found out from our trades within the city?" Dengwu asked curiously, and Huiyu nodded his head. It was impossible for the four of them to make any move at all before they were more knowledgeable about the world they were now stuck in. "Okay. First, these dungeons are split into 2 kinds of areas. Some of them are caves like this one, and the others are tunnels. The tunnels are what connect the caves to each other." Dengwu stated all the information he had gotten from the women days before when he had traded meat with them. "The caves belong to only humans and very weak magical beasts, while the tunnels belong to the magical beasts." Hearing this made Huiyu nod his head. In that case, it made sense as to why the city lord and the elders would be astounded, for Huiyu's entourage were cultivators who managed to break through the area belonging to the beasts themselves. "This area is known as Cave's End," Dengwu continued with the report. "It is the end of all the caves. No one seems to know about the entrance we took to enter here. No one seems to know about the cabin we were at within the forest either. There are no cultivation techniques left in this cave. Everyone is cultivating according to their own way. When I asked about what they meant with their own way, none of them seemed to be able to describe it properly," Dengwu continued. But as soon as he started talking about a way, Huiyu's eyes became vacant as he once more remembered the enlightenment from before. Their own way. This was indeed important. Although Huiyu was cultivating in accordance with the rooster, he was also threading his own way in life, determined by the decisions he made and the actions he took. Somehow Huiyu felt as though the way he was treading had something to do with the laws of the world, but once again, it was impossible for him to put his finger on exactly what it meant. Complicated words and reasons were flooding his mind, and he eventually stopped thinking about it, as no new flash of enlightenment appeared. "Sorry," he said sheepishly. He once again made his friends wait for him, but none of them seemed to have any problems with it. Instead, Dengwu just nodded his head and continued with what he was saying. "This place, Cave's End, is the weakest of all the areas. Similarly, the beasts within the tunnels leading to the next cave are also the weakest. The closer you get to the center, the stronger everyone is." Saying this, Dengwu let out a depressed sigh. No one was able to tell me about the center, as no one has ever been there before. It is something far away which every cultivator dreams of reaching. Hearing this, Huiyu nodded his head as he was getting a rough idea of the world they had descended into. It was perfect for their training, as it would gradually get stronger and stronger. Huiyu silently applauded Lan Feng for his thoughts. "There was one more thing," Deng Wu said with a smile on his face, looking as though he had saved the best for last. "There is this thing called the Dragon Core," he started. Huiyu suddenly remembered the name from the day before. "This core appears once a year, and each year they require taxes. In return, they make sure that no magical beasts will overrun the cave. The Dragon Core are much stronger than the city lord and his elders. The city gladly pays the taxes every year, but every time they are here they end up taking whatever they desire on their way back, not shying away from killing the previous owners. If a beautiful woman took their fancy, she too would be forced away from her parents." Hearing this suddenly made Huiyu understand why there was such fear towards the Dragon Core, and he slowly nodded his head. He was about to open his mouth when Deng Wu held a finger in the air. "I heard that this year they would not have to pay any grain and taxes, that the city lord has managed to come up with such a great item that not even the women are in danger," Deng Wu said with a cheeky smile on his face. Huiyu felt a snicker appear on his face. It seemed as though sun was an item which the Dragon Core would like very much. "You could have told me that earlier," Huiyu exclaimed with laughter as he sat down on the ground once more, thinking about their next move.